Welcome back to my channel, where we make mathematics easy for everyone. Today we are going to look at cubic polynomials. Cubic polynomials, we are talking about expressions or equations that have the highest degree of 3, that is cubic, and how to solve them. We have 4 different methods of solving cubic polynomials. We have by factorization. We can solve by factorization. We can solve using grouping, that is factorization. And we can solve using the dispersion method. We can solve using the synthetic method. And we can also solve using the long division method. But here we have a function they are asking us to solve using the inspection method and the synthetic method. So we go through how we solve using these two methods. Now we have a function given. What we have to understand is that for us to solve a parabolic function, we factorize or we break it down. The highest degree shows that we are going to have 2 values of x for a parabolic function and 3 values of x for a cubic function. And a parabolic function, when we factorize, we see that we have 2 brackets made up of 2 linear functions. Likewise, in a cubic function, when we factorize or when we break it down, we will have 2 functions. And the 2 functions, one of them will be a linear function and the second one will be a parabolic function. So let's get into it. What do we do first? We look for a factor. A factor of that function will give us the linear function, and then we use it and go through towards getting the one. What is a factor? A factor of this function is any number that we can sub in to get a 0 out of this. Any number we can sub in for these values to get a 0 out of it is a factor. If we go into this, let's try 1 cubed minus 5 times 1 all squared minus 1 plus 5. Remember, you do random checks. You can try 1, 2, 3, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. And any number you can sub in, and the whole equation gives you 0, is a factor of that expression or equation. So we have 1 minus 5 is minus 4, minus 1 is minus 5, plus 5 is 0. So x equals to 1 is a factor. X equals to 1 is a factor of that function. But how do we represent it as a linear function? So this is x is equals to 1. If we equate this to 0, it will become x minus 1. Because this becomes x minus 1 is 0. This is where we came from. X minus 1 is 0, and then x becomes 1. So this is a linear function that we can get out from this. What next do we do? Since this will be a product of a linear and a parabolic function, we go towards getting the parabolic function. This is what we do. First of all, the first terms, if we are doing our distributive, the first term and the first term will always give us the first term on this side. So if it is x here, to get x cubed, we divide with this. So x times x squared will give us x cubed. Or x cubed divided by the first one gives us the first one. So we'll deal with the first and the last. And then we'll use what we call the inspection method to get the middle term. Now the last term here is 5. But we have negative 1 here. So to get the last term for the parabolic function as well, we divide what we have here with negative 1. So it's 5 divided by negative 1. That will give us negative 5. Now, what we are missing in the parabolic function is the middle term. Remember, every parabolic function is of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. Now we have our a, we have our c, we don't have our b. But let's just call it n for the purpose of this study. It's the same thing if you use b. Now, what do we do? When we have gotten the 2 brackets, remember it is not complete yet. We still need n. as a value, When we can't figure it out direct, this is where the inspection method comes in. We multiply the contents on the right hand side to get something that is equivalent to this in the cubic format. So we use distributive. Let's go. This goes into this, will give us x cubed plus mx squared minus 5x minus x squared minus mx and then plus 5. So this is now in the same format as the original expression. Remember, why we are doing this is because we want to get the value of n. We check, so what we do here is we check the ones that have x on both sides with the same degree of exponent and equate them together with an element of n in order to solve for n. So what do? I can choose mx squared or mx, whichever one is supposed to give me the answer. So let's go with x squared. So if I'm choosing 5x squared, then anything that has x to the degree of 2 on this side, all of them must be chosen. So I have mx squared minus x squared. So I have x squared here, x squared here. What do I do next? Factorize. So that we can eliminate x squared. Remember, you can't solve for 2 unknown at the same time. So I have n minus 1 here. Doing this, x squared on this side can cancel out x squared on this side. I have n minus 1 equals to 5. If I collect like terms, minus 1 coming over becomes plus 1. M will be minus 5 plus 1, and m will be minus 4. Minus 5 plus 1 gives me minus 4. Gives me minus 4. Now, remember I said we should solve for x. They didn't ask us to factorize. If we were just factorizing, we will just plug in n as negative 4 and we are done. But we need to solve. So let's go back and plug in our n and finish the work. So we got n as minus 4. So the expression that we are solving now becomes x minus 1 into x squared minus 4x minus 5 equals to 0. So we are solving for this. Equate individual brackets, it is in 0. Equate individual brackets to 0. So we have x equals to 1. From this, we already know. Now we think about factorizing the second one. So the second one here, if we factorize that, that's a parabolic function, quadratic function. The two values that will give us the middle when we add them and give us the last when we multiply them, we have minus 5 and x plus 1. Minus 5 plus 1 gives me minus 4. Minus 5 times 1 gives me minus 5. So this will give me this. Now it means at the end, the values of x will be 5 and x will be equals to negative 1. Remember, this is a cubic function. So we must return 3 values of x, which is negative 1, 5, and negative 1, 5, and positive 1. So this is how we use the inspection method to solve. Remember, get your cubic function, get a factor. That is the approach. A factor must be a linear function or a value you can plug in that gives you a 0. Create that linear function, go from first to first and divide and get your parabolic function. First to first, last divided the last term of the cubic function and put your dx or mx here. Multiply out to have the same format as the cubic function. Equate functions of x with the same degree of exponent and solve for n. Plug back n into the parabolic equation and factorize. If it's not factorizable, use the quadratic formula. It will give you 3 values of x. and that is the inspection method. Now let's look at the synthetic method and how we can use it to solve problems. For the synthetic method, it is actually faster to work with it. What we do is we go to the given function and write out the coefficients for every part of it. The coefficient here is 1, the coefficient here is -5, coefficient of the third one is -1, the last term is 5. Now, the second approach, the factor that we got was x equals to 1. We start dividing. Long division, we divide, we add, we multiply. Here is slightly different. It's slightly different here. We have two basic approaches. Now, we add, multiply, add. Let's see. We start from this. We start adding upwards. There's nothing here. If there's nothing here, we start from here. We say 0 plus 1 is 1. And then we multiply with the divisor. 1 times 1 is 1. We write it on the other. So you see, add, multiply. And then we go through the next one, we add again. So it's here, add and multiply. 1 plus -5 will give us -4. We multiply again. So it's add, multiply, multiply. Now -4 times 1 is -4. We write it here. Then we add. -4 plus -1 is -5. We multiply again. 1 times -5 is -5. -5 plus 5 is 0. This will always tell us that we are doing the same thing because we are supposed to arrive at 3 terms, which is a parabolic or quadratic function. So it means that for the quadratic function, the coefficient of x squared will be 1, the coefficient of x will be 4, and the constant term will be 5. So this is the parabolic function, whereas we have used the factor to generate the linear function. So if you look at this, you will see that we have arrived at the same thing as this. So you can either use the synthetic method to go through and arrive at the same thing, factorize, or use the quadratic formula to get your final answer. Someone will say, why don't I just use this? It's easier to work with. Remember, in some papers, they are always very particular about the method they want you to use. And you can use a different method if you are asked to do a different thing. So this is how we use inspection method and synthetic method to solve problems involving cubic polynomials. Please remember to share this video, subscribe, encourage your friends to subscribe. Ask questions. I'm always here and willing to help. Enjoy the rest of your day.